Hello, my name is Seth Garcia, and this is my Western Enlightenment presentation for English class 2333003. So in order for us to understand what the Western Enlightenment is and what it stands for, it's important that we make a description clear. Before I dive into how it influenced the 21st century, any other periods that were influenced or related to this, and what we see today as a result of the Western Enlightenment, let's do a quick description. So the Enlightenment from 1715 to 1789 in Europe and France was an age of new discovery and immense change in perspective when it came to medicine, music, government, religion, the arts, you name it, and sciences, philosophy, but most importantly, philosophy. It was, as well as government. It was seen as a period where the smartest of men, all being either architects, philosophers, or scientists, rising beyond the merely physical and temporal to the bodiless and eternal. So this enlightenment soon reached the West and became the Western Enlightenment, in which ideas revolving around reason and how reason was the sole contributor of genuinity and legitimacy. In other words, Catholic religion and the faith had change coming their way as soon as the Enlightenment expanded. For instance, not everything was going to be valued as much as pure reason, and the separation of government and religion was at its highest. Science and individual thinking was becoming a source of everybody's knowledge, and it seemed normal today, but not back then. Like, this was an idea that everyone was, almost ashamed of, if you put it like in a certain way, just due to the fact that people were forced to keep like a box mentality, like stay in the box mentality back then, especially with church being the main dictator in all their decisions, including government officials. They're trying to please the church. So now that we've discussed that, how does Western Enlightenment influence the 21st century? So I can give a lot of examples here. The music, for example, that encompassed the West during this time of growth and self-reflection, in what was called the Baroque period, is still experimented with a nod sought after in today's musical classrooms and studies. Bach and Vivaldi, two of the most famous and esteemed musicians who ever lived, composed during the Enlightenment and have pieces such as the Brandenburg Concerto and Vivaldi's Sinfonia that are taught to students today all around the world in the 21st century who want to master music. Aside from this, enlightenment within oneself is used today in philosophy to understand the human race and why people do things. In other words, what tends to motivate them. For instance, the whole reason the Enlightenment started was due to religion and bland, unquestioned regulations that were becoming more valuable than common reason and overall growth of the human mind. So this was like a need. We needed to change, Political modernization, another thing that you can see today, is a big thing that changed the West, as it focused on people's democracy and separating church and state, which was a good thing, being that the church had always been involved in the state for years now, and it was preventing advancements in better forms of government for so long, which is used in 2021 now in principles behind why we pass laws and accommodate everybody's say-so in legislation. That is, what I mean by that is, like, we take everybody into consideration instead of letting religion be the sole reason something's passed or given more attention to than a secular law or secular issue. Medicine and chemistry were also changed and altered in a way that can now be taught in full to kids at school in today's world and in today's laboratories. Breakthroughs in medicine, for example, the thermometer, as well as magnetism and electricity, were ever present, which influenced many technological advancements in our houses, job places, and social gatherings in today's cities, including our own. So here's a video I attached of Bach's music, for example, and how he influenced through his music the Western Enlightenment. Now, it's really cool because even through the music, you can tell this was made during that Western Enlightenment, just because the melodies were changing from the traditional music that was taught and played. People were really innovators. I really wouldn't even call them musicians. They were more innovators. Bach and Vivaldi, among the other, as well as the other composers and writers of music, they really were changing the game as much as they could. Uh, Not even like, if you couldn't do it in science, then you could do it in music. And if you can change the world around you in music, you do it through philosophy. There was always a channel and a pathway down contributing to the Western Enlightenment, and that's what I love about it. So yeah, that's one of his pieces. That's his Brandenburg Concerto piece. So, in relation to identity, yes, obviously, technically, there are many paths that can lead to self-identity, and there's obviously a fine line between, personal identity and philosophical truths and absolute truths with science and such. However, identity was the rampant jewel everyone sought after during the Enlightenment, and Western culture dove into every aspect of human progress to try and achieve it for themselves. Catholic religion was on the rise at the time, and with this new enlightenment occurring, it gave many desperate people a chance to be themselves and not feel pressured to fit into the religion they were subjected to by the public. It definitely encouraged musical expression, obviously, which does relate to identity. Other literary periods that relate. Interestingly enough, the Renaissance period relates heavily to Western Enlightenment period. Baroque period, which was during and part of the Western Enlightenment, drew on the traditions of the Renaissance era, but also expanded into harmonics and ornamental boundaries. This pushed musical boundaries and allowed a pathway for future musicians to experiment with chords and opera-like chord progressions that were sought after by Bach and Vivaldi, amongst the other Western Enlightenment musicians and composers. The Romantic period and the Neoclassical period are two which emphasize poetry and dramatic action to paintings that look almost lifelike and detailed to the max. Literally looking like I'm looking at another person in the flesh. In conclusion, it is obvious that the Western Enlightenment had been such a powerful force of influence to make progress separate with individuality and take the church away from state procedures. Do all of these influence today's world and functions? Absolutely. We live in a privileged society and form of governing that makes it hard for us to understand and appreciate what we did not have to go through. Lots of innovations and ideas were shamed and not fully accepted until things started to grow to a certain point. Not all these ideas that were like great ideas back then are seen like that, Today, since they went against the grain, and the grain was religion, so today we can live without religions jumping on our backs when we make a decision or arrange things within the government to better the people. And this is my works cited page. And this is my pictures and video. I hope you enjoyed my presentation on the Western Enlightenment. Thank you, and have a good day.